When looking at the 1998 Gus Van Sant remake of Hitchcock's 1960s classic Psycho, the question is, why? Why was it remade, and in this shot-for-shot fashion? Take Michael Haneke's remake of Funny Games, for example. 10 years after the release of the original, shot in German, it was asked of him that he made a remake for American audiences. Haneke being Haneke, he thought the original was all that was needed, and that the only reason it wasn't receiving the attention it deserved from its mainstream audience was because it wasn't in English. And so the film was remade shot for shot with new American actors, in an almost artistic statement of, my original was perfect the way it was, and to prove it, I'll only remake the language it's told in. When asked where the ideas for the project originally came from, Gus had these words to say.
For me, it was mostly because I'd never heard of it done, and I was aware that a lot of people are adverse to watching black and white movies today.
Right.
So that I got this idea that less and less people were watching, older movies.
He went on to further elaborate at a different interview. With Psycho, I was sort of angry at Hollywood trying to remake movies because it seemed like they would rob the screenplay and forget all the other inputs, whatever else existed. So I said, why don't you just shoot it exactly the way it is, because it's a great movie? This was my sort of anti-remake statement. Danny Elfman said the critics would kill me, which they did. I still thought that it was worthy of experimentation. So, when remaking a film, it is important to bring something new, or to revitalize something with modern technology in filmmaking. What was changed here? How were the many ongoing themes and motifs of Psycho handled? To run the themes that I take away most from the film without going too far into detail are as follows. Marion's last name, Crane, is a direct reference to the docile bird in which finds danger from that of larger, more predatory birds. Norman's last name is yet another reference, this time with the definition of bait being of a hawk, beat the wings in agitation and flutter off the perch. The movie opens in Phoenix, Arizona, which can be a reference to the bird of mythology known for living a constant cycle, which could be said of Norman's attempts to suppress his mother. When talking with Marion over dinner in the parlour, she is framed with fragile birds and fragile china, whilst Norman is surrounded by the shadows of hunting birds, symbolising the danger he represents to her. Finally, after Norman knocks Marion off, he also knocks off a photo of a bird. We as the audience feel like a peeping Tom from the very opening shot as Hitchcock slowly invites us into the private life of Marion as she goes about her sexual affairs. This lingering and stalker-like camera movement invites us to pry later when she packs for a trip whilst the money lays on her bed. Marion has a real sense of being followed throughout the film. That all starts with her boss spotting her once she leaves with the money, which is then escalated a step further with the police, in true Hitchcock paranoia, once she is given a word to for sleeping on the road. As she drives away from him, a feeling of being followed drills away at Marion as she fears for the worst. Norman spies on Marion through a peephole which is hidden by a painting. This painting, Susanna and the Elders, is reflective on what's to come, as the painting tells the story of men who spy on a lady bathing before being overcome by passion and accusing her of sexual blackmail. Once our main protagonist of the first 40 or so minutes winds up dead, the focus is then switched to Norman, and the surveillance is too, through the roles of the PI, Sam, and the sister. Mirrors are introduced to show the other side of Marion once she decides to take off with the money, highlighting the other side of her character, the duality of her good and her bad. The characters of Norman and Marion are opposites of each other, like day and night, and a mirror is usually within frame when they are together, to symbolize their connection, sometimes holding them together. Their connection is further solidified when you process that both have smiling close-up shots staring at the camera after their inner thoughts have been heard. So, although they both share the ongoing motifs, are there minor differences? When Van Sant shoots some of the longer takes that are meant to entice a feeling of the viewer spying on things they shouldn't, such as the opening and the packing scene, There is something to the speed and the movement of the camera itself that struggles to leave a lingering feeling of paranoia on the audience that Hitchcock masterfully musters up. The film also struggles to capture any sense of shadows, underutilizing the depth of field, which is considerably noticeable in the parlour scene, in which Vince Vaughn becomes threatening, but the hunting birds behind him aren't crisp or in focus, and so the motif of the birds doesn't land as hard as in the original, which has it all in plain sight, the birds' shadows cast all over the frame. In comparison, it's quite ridiculous how rushed some of the scenes from the original that had such incredible tension have now been shot by Gus. The car scene, for example, feels completely void of any fear, as the pacing and editing, as well as the performance, leave much to be desired in comparison to the original. There are some minor changes to the two main characters for the first half as well, and whether this was a directorial decision or the actors, it comes off in a way that doesn't quite land. Norman Bates is portrayed as a less likeable character. Vince makes it seem like his character was going to be evil from the get-go, with some of the facials and the deliveries of certain lines. And we also have Gus to thank for this. Thanks, Gus. Marion is played off as a bit more of a cold-hearted woman as opposed to her normally upright woman of great morals put through a tense situation of stress. She can be seen cutting people off or rushing them in the Gus Van Sant version. So, does the film serve its purpose in being remade? No. It was a complete critical and audience failure, even to Gus's acknowledgement. One thing it does prove, though, is the importance of a director and their passion to the project, that when even handed a beautifully constructed screenplay, the execution and direction is at the forefront of the film's success. Gus himself put it best when he said, "Even if you try to copy a film shot by shot, you still can't. It's still your own film. I'm not really the same type of person as Alfred Hitchcock, and you really need that thing that he was in order for Psycho to work in the way that it should."